Welcome to licensed RPGs, where I review role-playing games based on books, movies, cartoons, TV shows, comics, and even anime. For today's episode, we're going to be taking a look at an old fan game created using the RPG Maker 95 engine. And while I did play this game back in the day, my most recent playthrough shattered the nostalgia glasses, to be sure, and reminded me of how much of a mess this game really is. So if you can't guess already, this review is going to be highly critical and offer little in terms of compliments. If you want to understand why I feel this game is so bad, then please stick around. Starting off, this game's narrative is derived from A Hero's Legacy, the only movie to be released under the Dragon Ball GT label, which is probably a good thing since the movie only serves to make a mess out of other factoids associated with the series, and has a main character whose heritage is entirely unknown outside of either being the grandson or great-great-grandson of Pan. Though I prefer not to discuss the disappointing mess that was Dragon Ball GT and simply focus on the problems with the narrative within the game itself, and not those that inherited from the movie. There are two major problems that drag down the plot in my opinion when it comes to this game. The lesser of these two issues is the poor pacing this game has because of how much padding it receives from having an insanely high encounter rate that will often lead to you engaging an enemy after 6 or 7 steps most of the time. The bigger problem on my mind is how the game breaks continuity with the ending of the actual movie, and this change removes Goku Jr.'s first Super Saiyan transformation, as well as his fight with Lord Yao, a powerful demon lord. I mean, of all the things you could have changed for this project, why would you remove the best scene in the entire movie?
It's dinner time.
Put him down!
What?
I can't let you hurt my friends! Lord Yao, your reign is over!
I've eaten countless humans who are lost in these woods, and you'll be no different! I am Lord of the Demons. You are but a child. How can this be?
With that being said, I'm aware that this game does include a scene where Goku Jr. goes Super Saiyan against Vegeta Jr. in an optional boss fight / recruitment battle, but it doesn't have the same feel to it as the movie scene. Even if the reason Goku Jr. transforms into a Super Saiyan is in order to save 2 bears he has become friends with. Though to end on a positive note, the game does include multiple side quests that allow you to recruit 2 characters you wouldn't receive otherwise, as well as to do battle against optional bosses. Graphically speaking, the game is a mess on my current PC at least. If the game is allowed to be in full screen mode, certain text doesn't appear, and the game can have issues with you pulling up and closing the menu. And if you play outside of full screen mode, the game surrounds all the character sprites and certain objects with a blue box. Another issue the game has regardless of which mode you are in is that character sprites can't appear to lay down in a bed. In fact, this issue is almost hilarious when you go to the hospital in order to visit Pan, who has fallen seriously ill, only to see her standing on the bed like she's preparing to jump up and down on it like a 3-year-old. And I'll also have to admit to finding Vegeta Jr. rather odd in this game, both in terms of his character sprite on the map and his boss sprite, which looks like a slightly edited image of Vegeta from Dragon Ball Z. I'm not entirely sure why I have issues with the character sprite on the world map, but it feels off in some weird sort of way in comparison to the rest of the sprites on the map. On the other hand, the boss sprite is easier to tear into since it doesn't match any design elements of the monsters in the game, which appear to be taken directly from the resources of RPG Maker 95 instead of being custom sprites. But before I move on to the next area, I have one final complaint to bring up about the graphics / animations within this game, and it has to deal with what happens when a character is knocked out during a fight. After you leave that battle, assuming you win or run away, you'll quickly come to notice that your knocked out character's sprite no longer moves while you're traversing over the world map. Sound-wise, this game does fare a bit better since I only have 2 complaints, with both of them being rather standard for RPG Maker games. And these complaints are that most of the music feels rather generic, and that the game lacks any sort of volume control. And outside of those issues, the music is serviceable, even if it is forgettable. Gameplay-wise is where this game truly falls apart, though, with issues ranging from the control scheme to how much experience you gain after battles. Though to start off with, I'll try to explain why the control layout is poor for this game, but I'm not entirely sure if this is because it's the default layout in RPG Maker 95, or if the creator made a personal decision on the layout. But regardless, it is still a problem. And the main reason it's a problem is because you interact with objects by hitting the Enter key while moving with the arrow keys. This means you'll have to reposition your hand in order to perform an action. Though the real kicker is that you have to right-click on the mouse in order to access the menu, which means you'll need to move your hand all the way away from the keyboard in order to do so. And while I guess you could counter this to a degree by playing the game almost entirely with the mouse, since you can move on the world map by utilizing the mouse, it feels much slower than using the arrow keys. I'll also admit to finding it a bit annoying to have to use the mouse in order to cancel a selection I made while selecting my moves for combat. And the mouse can sometimes get in the way of combat as well, since you'll usually just spam your basic melee attack. But if the mouse is left on screen as in the lower half of it, you may be highlighting one of the other options during combat, such as running away. Another issue you notice right away is that early enemies dole out a lot of damage, but offer little in terms of reward. But the problem goes beyond that, since the rewards for defeating enemies seem to have been determined almost by random chance, since the best enemy to grind on in the game is also something you can easily take down around level 8. It's just mind-numbing in my opinion that your best bet to grind for levels and cash is on a monster that can easily be taken down at such a low level, and arguably has the best experience payout in the entire game. Another issue that feels like a poor design choice in my opinion is how underwhelming the special attacks are. In fact, your basic key blast is so weak that you're usually better off just running up and punching your enemies in the face! About the only upside to key techniques from what I've seen is that they never miss. Though that is a poor upside to offer since only the bosses tend to have any chance of dodging your punches and kicks anyway. And one final hiccup in my opinion is the loading times. Every time you enter a new area in this game, you have to wait a few seconds for the music to load in order to move, and while I have seen worse, it is noticeable. The only upsides the game does have to offer is that it utilizes a turn-based combat system, which may appeal to turn-based fanboys like myself, and that allows you to save at any time if you aren't currently engaged in combat, but these are small positives in a sea of negatives. Overall, Goku Jr.'s Adventures is a rather lackluster fan game that fails to deliver in my opinion. It suffers from making unnecessary changes to the source material, as well as from bad controls and graphical glitches. All in all, this game just isn't worth playing unless you're a diehard fan of the Dragon Ball franchise and want to experience everything associated with it, even if it doesn't come from the creator of the series.